When you lose everything, your husband, your home, the land you've worked for years, what do you do when there's nowhere left to go? Martha Cain, 62 and alone, chose to walk. With blistered feet and a worn pack, she headed for a forgotten ridge she'd inherited as a girl. Then she met Eli Boone, a weathered cowboy in his 70s, traveling with only his donkey for company. Two people who'd lost everything. Two people who thought their building days were over. But in the shadow of the pines, with timber on their shoulders, they began raising a cabin, and something neither expected, a second chance at a new life. Can two broken hearts build something strong enough to last? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dust rose in small clouds with each step Martha took along the gravel road. Her boots, once sturdy work boots that had served her through countless seasons on the farm, were now worn thin at the soles. She could feel every pebble through the leather, every uneven patch of ground. The late September sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the rolling hills of eastern Oregon, and Martha pulled her hat down lower to shield her eyes. She'd been walking for 3 days now. 3 days since she'd locked the door to the rental room above the hardware store in Fossil, shouldered her pack, and turned her face toward the mountains. The pack wasn't heavy. She'd learned long ago that most of what people thought they needed, they didn't, but it was enough. A change of clothes, a wool blanket, her grandmother's Bible, a tin cup, and a small bag of dried beans and jerky. And the deed, folded carefully in a waterproof pouch. The deed to 40 acres on Whiskey Ridge, land that had belonged to her mother's people, going back 3 generations. Martha had been 62 years old for 4 months now. 4 months since David died. 7 months since the bank had foreclosed on their farm, the one they'd worked together for 40 years, the one where they'd raised their daughter and buried 2 stillborn sons, the one where every fence post and furrow held a memory. The farm was gone. David was gone. Their daughter, Rebecca, lived in Portland now with her own family, her own troubles. She'd offered Martha a room, of course she had. But Martha had seen the worry in her son-in-law's eyes, the tight budget they were keeping, the 2 teenagers who needed college funds. No, Martha had decided. She wouldn't be a burden. Not to anyone. The wedding ring on her left hand caught the light as she adjusted her pack straps. Simple gold, worn smooth after 4 decades. David had bought it with his first paycheck from the sawmill, back when they were both 22 and foolish enough to believe love could conquer anything. She twisted it absently, a habit she'd developed in the months since he'd passed. It was loose now. She'd lost weight, the kind of weight that comes from grief and beans on toast and forgetting to eat. But she couldn't bring herself to take it off. The road curved ahead, following the line of a creek that ran swift and clear over smooth stones. Martha paused, setting down her pack, and knelt by the water. Her knees protested, arthritis flaring, but she ignored it. She'd grown used to ignoring her body's complaints. She cupped her hands and drank deeply, the water so cold it made her teeth ache. Then she splashed her face, washing away the dust and sweat. When she looked up, she saw him, a man on horseback, moving slowly along the ridge above the creek. Even from a distance, she could see he was older, maybe even older than her. He sat easy in the saddle, the kind of ease that came from a lifetime of riding. Behind him, on a lead rope, walked a donkey loaded with packs. Martha stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. She wasn't afraid. Fear had become a luxury she couldn't afford, but she was cautious. Out here, miles from the nearest town, you learned to read people quick. The rider saw her and raised one hand in greeting. Then he turned his horse down the slope toward the creek, picking his way carefully through the sage and juniper. As he got closer, Martha could see his face beneath a battered hat, weathered, lined deeply, with pale blue eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. His beard was grey, neatly trimmed. He wore a worn canvas jacket and jeans that had seen better years. "Afternoon," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was rough, like gravel being sifted. "Afternoon," Martha replied. He glanced at her pack, then at the road stretching ahead. "You're traveling on foot?" I am. Long way between towns out here. I know it, he nodded, as if her answer told him something. The donkey brayed softly, and he reached back to pat her neck without looking. This here's Mabel. I'm Eli Boone. Martha Cain. Pleased to meet you, Martha Cain. He shifted in his saddle, studying her with those pale eyes. Where you headed, if you don't mind my asking? Martha considered not answering. She'd learned over the past few months that people asked questions out of either genuine concern or mere curiosity, and she didn't owe either of them much. But something about this man's quiet manner, the way he sat patient in his saddle waiting without pressing, made her decide to be honest. Whiskey Ridge. I've got land up there. Inherited it from my mother years back. Never did anything with it. Eli's eyebrows rose slightly. Whiskey Ridge. That's another 2 days on foot, maybe more. Rough country. I expect it is. You planning to camp along the way? I am. He was quiet for a moment, and Martha could almost see him working through the facts. A woman in her 60s, traveling alone on foot, heading into rough country with nothing but a pack. He didn't say any of it out loud, though. Instead, he looked at the sun, then back at her. I'm heading in that direction myself. Got a camp about 3 miles up near Coyote Springs. You're welcome to share my fire tonight. I've got coffee and some rabbit stew from yesterday. Still good. Martha's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been alone for months now, and solitude had become comfortable, a worn coat she'd wrapped around herself. But the truth was, her feet were blistered, her back ached, and the thought of hot coffee and real food made her mouth water. I appreciate the offer, she said. I won't be trouble. Didn't figure you would be. Eli dismounted with a grunt, favoring his right leg slightly. He led his horse to the creek to drink. We'll walk together if that suits you. Horses need the stretch, and I could use it myself. Been in that saddle since dawn. They walked in silence for a while, following the creek as it wound through a canyon thick with ponderosa pine. The air smelled of resin and dry grass. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Martha found herself matching her stride to Eli's, both of them moving with the careful pace of people who'd learned not to hurry. Mabel walked behind them, her hooves clip-clopping on the stones, occasionally stopping to nibble at whatever interested her. You from around here originally? Eli asked after a time. Born in John Day, moved to Mitchell when I married. We had a farm there. She paused, then added, lost it this spring. I'm sorry to hear it. Martha shrugged, though the gesture didn't quite hide the tightness in her chest. The way things go sometimes. My husband passed last May. Bank wouldn't work with me on the loan. That's hard, Eli said simply. Not offering platitudes, not telling her it would all work out. Just acknowledging the hardness of it. What about you? Martha asked, partly to shift the subject. You from Oregon? Montana originally. Worked ranches all over, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada. Did some time in the oil fields when the ranch work dried up, but that near killed me. He smiled slightly. I'm too old for that kind of work now. Mostly I wander. Take odd jobs here and there. Fix fences, break horses, whatever needs doing. Sounds lonely. It can be, he admitted. But it suits me. My wife passed 15 years back, cancer. Our boy was killed in Iraq in 2005. After that, I just couldn't stay in one place. Felt like the walls were closing in. Martha was quiet, absorbing this. I'm sorry about your son. Thank you. Brian was a good boy. Man, I should say. He was 23. Eli's voice was steady, but Martha could hear the old grief beneath it. Worn smooth like river stones, but never quite gone. They walked on, and somehow the shared silence between them felt different now. Not uncomfortable, but understanding. Two people who'd lost pieces of themselves along the way. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and gold, they reached Eli's camp. It was simple. A small clearing near the spring, with a fire ring made of stones and a rope strung between 2 trees for Eli's tarp. He'd already set up his bedroll and gear, everything neat and orderly. I'll tend to the animals, Eli said. You can get that fire going if you like. Wood stacked there. Martha nodded and set to work. Her hands remembered the motions, gathering kindling, arranging it just so, striking a match. Soon she had a small fire crackling. She pulled out her tin cup and filled it from the spring, then sat on a log near the flames. Eli unsaddled his horse and rubbed him down, talking to the animal in a low voice. He did the same with Mabel, checking her hooves, making sure she had grain and water. There was something calming about watching him work, Martha thought. He moved with practiced efficiency but without hurry, treating the animals with quiet respect. When he joined her at the fire, he pulled out a pot and began heating the rabbit stew. The smell made Martha's stomach growl audibly, and Eli smiled. "Been a while since you had a hot meal." "A while," she admitted. He poured coffee from a battered pot, handing her a cup. It was strong and bitter and perfect. Martha wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "Tell me about this land on Whiskey Ridge," Eli said. "What are you planning to do with it?" Martha stared into the fire. "Build a cabin. Something small, just enough for me. I've got a little money saved, not much, but enough for supplies if I do the work myself. Figure I can put up a simple place before winter. One room, maybe a loft. I'm handy enough with tools. My husband taught me. That's ambitious work for one person, maybe, but I don't have anywhere else to go, and I won't live on charity. This land is mine, free and clear. Nobody can take it from me." She looked at him. "You probably think I'm foolish." "No," Eli said quietly. "I think you're determined. There's a difference." He ladled stew into 2 bowls and handed her one. "I've done some building in my time. If you need a hand while I'm in the area, I'd be willing to help. Payment in meals and coffee." Martha studied his face in the firelight, looking for pity or condescension, but found neither. "Just an honest offer from one traveler to another. I'd appreciate that," she said finally. "Thank you." They ate in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them, the night settling over the canyon with 1,000 stars emerging overhead. And for the first time in months, Martha felt something other than grief and exhaustion. It was small, fragile as a candle flame, but it was there, a flicker of possibility, of hope. Maybe, she thought, just maybe it wasn't too late to build something new. They reached Whiskey Ridge 2 days later, in the early afternoon when the light slanted golden through the pines. Martha stood at the edge of the clearing, looking at what remained of the old homestead her great-grandfather had built in 1889. It wasn't much. The cabin had collapsed years ago, leaving only a stone foundation and a few rotting logs thick with moss. The well still stood, though, its stone walls intact, covered with a wooden cap that had warped but held. An old apple tree grew near where the front door must have been, gnarled and wild, but still bearing fruit. Scattered around the clearing were rusted pieces of farm equipment, a broken plow, part of a wagon wheel, remnants of a life long abandoned. But the land itself was beautiful. 40 acres of pine forest and meadow, with a spring-fed creek running along the southern boundary. The ridge rose behind the clearing, offering protection from the north wind. You could see for miles from here, down into the valley, where the John Day River carved its way through ancient stone. Martha dropped her pack and walked slowly across the clearing, her boots crushing dry grass. She'd been here once as a girl, maybe 7 years old, with her mother and grandmother. She barely remembered it, just flashes of green trees and her grandmother's voice telling stories about the people who'd lived here. Her great-grandfather had been a trapper and a farmer, raising 5 children in that cabin. When he died, her grandmother had moved to town, unable to keep the place alone. The land had passed through the family, forgotten, until it came to Martha's mother, and then to Martha herself. She'd meant to do something with it for years. David had talked about building a hunting cabin here. Maybe, but there'd never been time, never been money. And then suddenly there'd been no David at all. Good water, good timber, southern exposure, Eli said, walking the perimeter of the old foundation. He'd been quiet during the last leg of their journey, respectful of what Martha might be feeling. Now he crouched down and examined the stonework. Foundation's solid. Your people built well. My great-grandfather did this with his own hands, Martha said. Him and some neighbors. They held a cabin raising in the spring of 1890, my grandmother told me. 20 people came from 50 miles around. That's how it was done, Eli said. He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. You planning to build on the same spot? I thought I would. Seems right, somehow, Eli nodded. He walked over to the apple tree and picked one of the small, misshapen fruits. He bit into it and grimaced slightly. Tart but edible. This tree's probably 70 years old, maybe more. He looked at Martha. You've got everything you need here. Water, timber, shelter from the wind. The hard part is the building. Martha set down her pack and pulled out the folded papers she'd been carrying. The deed, but also hand-drawn plans she'd sketched in the rental room back in Fossil during the long, sleepless nights. A simple cabin, 16 by 20 feet, with a loft for sleeping. A wood stove, a table, a couple of chairs. Nothing fancy, but solid. A place to live. I know it's ambitious, she said, handing the plans to Eli, but I've helped David build enough sheds and barns. I understand the basics, and I've got $3,000 saved. That should buy the hardware, the windows, the stove. I can fell the timber here and mill it at the sawmill in Kimberley. Eli studied the plans, his weathered face thoughtful. This is good work. Whoever drew this knows what they're doing. I did. Spent a lot of nights figuring it out. He looked at her with new respect. Martha, I meant what I said about helping, but I need to be honest with you. This is more than a week's work. This is going to take 2 months, maybe 3, and that's with 2 people working steady. Winter comes early up here. We're already into October. I know, and you're planning to do this alone. Martha felt something tighten in her chest. She'd been pushing down the fear, the doubt, the sheer impossibility of what she was attempting. But hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I don't have a choice, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. I don't have anywhere else to go. This land is all I have left. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the plans and handed them back to her. And I'll stay. What? I'll stay and help you build it. Through winter if needed. I've got no place I need to be, and Mabel's getting too old for long travels anyway. We can winter here as well as anywhere. Martha stared at him. Eli, I can't pay you. I told you I've got $3,000, but that's got to stretch for all the materials, and I don't want payment. Well, except for meals and coffee like we agreed. He smiled slightly. I'm 73 years old, Martha. I've spent the last 15 years wandering because I couldn't stand to be still, couldn't stand to be around people who wanted to talk about Brian or Ellie like they were just names instead of my whole world. But the truth is, I'm tired. Tired of waking up in a different place every week. Tired of having nothing that matters. You want to build something that lasts. So do I. Maybe this cabin isn't mine, but helping build it, that matters. That's something real. Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wasn't a woman who cried easily, had learned long ago that tears didn't change anything. But this offer, this unexpected kindness from a man who owed her nothing, it cracked something open in her chest that she'd been holding closed for months. I don't know what to say, she managed. Say yes. Say we start tomorrow. Eli looked around the clearing. First thing we do is set up a decent camp. We'll need a good tarp shelter, a proper cook area, and a way to keep dry when the rains come. Then we'll start felling timber. I know a man at the sawmill in Kimberley, Joe Brennan. Good man. He'll give us a fair price on milling, and he's got a flatbed truck. We can haul the lumber up here once it's cut. Martha listened as Eli talked through the logistics, his voice calm and sure. He'd done this before, she realized. Maybe not built a cabin, exactly, but he'd worked enough construction and ranch jobs to know how things got done. We'll need to make a list, she said. Figure out exactly what materials we need, how much everything costs. I need to know if the money will stretch. We'll be careful with it, Eli assured her. And we'll scavenge what we can. Some of this old equipment might be salvageable. That wagon wheel, I might be able to fix it, use it for hauling timber. The important thing is we work smart, not fast. Martha pulled out a small notebook from her pack and a pencil. She sat down on one of the foundation stones and began making a list, Eli calling out items as she wrote. Dimensional lumber for framing. Roofing tin. Windows, 2, maybe 3. A door, nails, screws, brackets. A wood stove and stovepipe, insulation, chinking material. The list grew longer, and with each item the reality of the task settled heavier on Martha's shoulders. It was overwhelming. Impossible even. But Eli's steady presence beside her, his practical suggestions, made it feel just slightly less so. As the sun began to set, They set up camp in the clearing. Eli strung his tarp between trees, creating a shelter big enough for both of them to sleep under. Martha gathered wood for a fire, while Eli tended to the horse and donkey, making sure they had water from the creek and were hobbled where they could graze. That night, sitting by the fire with the ruined foundation behind them and the dark forest pressing close, Martha looked at the plans again. In the firelight, the simple sketch seemed both fragile and solid at once. A promise, a hope, a dream that might just be possible. "Eli," she said quietly, "why are you really doing this?" He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a spiral of sparks. "I told you. I need something that matters. But why this? Why me?" He looked at her then, his pale eyes reflecting the flames. "Because when I saw you by that creek 3 days ago, walking alone with blisters on your feet and determination in your face, I saw someone who wasn't giving up, someone who still believed they could build something. I lost that belief a long time ago. Maybe helping you build your cabin will help me find it again." Martha nodded, understanding settling between them like an agreement neither had to speak out loud. They were two people who'd lost everything, standing at the edge of starting over. It was terrifying and hopeless and just barely possible all at once. "Tomorrow," Martha said. "We start tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Eli agreed, and in the darkness beyond the firelight, the old foundation stones waited, ready to be built upon again. The first week was harder than Martha had imagined, and she'd imagined it would be hard. They began each day before dawn, Eli starting the fire while Martha boiled water for coffee. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and whatever they'd managed to hunt or forage the day before, they worked until the light failed. Eli taught Martha how to read the trees, identifying which pines were straight and tall enough for logs, which were diseased or too knotted to be useful. Together they felled 6 trees in those first days, using Eli's crosscut saw and wedges, working in rhythm, push, pull, until each tree cracked and groaned and fell with a tremendous crash that echoed through the forest. It was brutal work. Martha's hands blistered within the first 2 days, the skin rubbing raw even through her gloves. Her shoulders burned, her back ached in ways she hadn't thought possible. Each night she collapsed onto her bedroll, too exhausted even to pull off her boots, and woke the next morning stiff as a board. But she didn't complain. Eli, 20 years her senior, worked beside her with steady determination, and if he could do it, so could she. On the 3rd day, while they were limbing a fallen pine, Eli's right leg gave out beneath him. He went down hard, catching himself on his hands, and for a moment couldn't get up. Martha hurried over, alarmed. "I'm all right," he said, waving her off, but his face was pale and tight with pain. "Old injury. Acts up sometimes. From what? A horse threw me about 10 years back. Crushed my hip. Doctor said I'd never walk right again, but I proved him wrong. Mostly." He pulled himself up using a branch, favoring the leg. "I just need to rest it a minute." Martha insisted he sit down while she fetched water from the creek. When she returned, she found him massaging the leg, his jaw clenched. "You should have told me," she said. "Telling you wouldn't change anything. The work still needs doing, but we could pace ourselves differently. Take more breaks." Eli looked at her with something like appreciation. "Most people want to pretend old injuries aren't real. Easier that way." "I'm not most people," Martha said. "And I know about pain that doesn't show. My husband had diabetes the last 10 years of his life. Some days he could barely walk, but he'd still go out to the barn, still check the fences. Pride, I guess. Or stubbornness. There's not much difference between the two," Eli said. He drank deeply from the cup she offered. "We'll take more breaks." "You're right about that. No sense in breaking myself down so I'm useless come winter." They adjusted their routine after that. 2 hours of hard work, then a break. Martha found that she didn't mind the slower pace. It gave her time to observe, to learn. Eli knew more about building than she'd realized. He showed her how to read the grain of wood, how to spot rot before it was obvious, how to use tools in ways that saved energy. Every lesson was delivered matter-of-factly, without condescension. And Martha absorbed it all, in the evenings, after the light failed and they could no longer work. They began repairing the old wagon wheel Martha had found near the collapsed cabin. It was more damaged than they'd first thought. 3 spokes were cracked. The iron rim was bent, but Eli insisted it could be saved. "Nothing that's broken is beyond fixing," he said, running his hands over the weathered wood. "Not really. It just takes patience and the right approach." They worked on it by firelight, Eli heating the iron rim in the coals and hammering it back into shape, while Martha carved new spokes from seasoned pine. It was delicate work, requiring focus and care, and Martha found it soothing after the day's hard labor. There was something meditative about shaping the wood, watching it transform under her hands from a rough-cut piece into something smooth and functional. "My son would have liked you," Eli said one evening, not looking up from his work. "Brian, he appreciated people who didn't give up easy." Martha was quiet for a moment, fitting a spoke into place. "What was he like?" "Smart, kind, had a good sense of humor, could make you laugh even when you didn't want to. He enlisted right out of high school. Said he wanted to serve something bigger than himself. I was proud of that, but also terrified, you know. Every day he was over there, I'd wake up wondering if this was the day someone in uniform would knock on our door." Eli's hands stilled on the iron rim. "When they finally did come, it was the worst day of my life. Worse even than when Ellie died." "I'm sorry," Martha said quietly. "People say that a lot. I'm sorry. Like they're apologizing for something they didn't do. But you know what I learned? It's not about the words. It's about whether the person saying them understands loss. You understand it." "I can tell." "I do," Martha admitted. "When David died, it felt like the whole world had gone gray, like someone had turned down the color and sound on everything. I went through the motions, the funeral, sorting his things, trying to keep the farm, but I wasn't really there. I was just a ghost walking around in my own life." Eli nodded. "That's exactly it, a ghost. I spent years like that, moving from place to place, working jobs, but never really present. Never really living. Do you feel different now?" He considered the question, testing the rim's shape with his thumb. "I don't know yet. Ask me when the cabin's built." They worked in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the wheel slowly taking shape. Martha thought about what he'd said, about nothing being beyond fixing. She wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that she wasn't too old, too broken, too tired to start over. But belief was a fragile thing, easily shattered. On the 7th day they loaded 6 milled logs onto Eli's horse and made the long trip down the ridge to Kimberley. The sawmill sat on the edge of town, a ramshackle collection of buildings surrounded by mountains of fresh-cut lumber. Joe Brennan, the owner, was a thick-set man in his 50s, with sawdust in his beard and a handshake like iron. "Eli Boone," he said, grinning. "Thought you'd moved on to Idaho. Changed my plans." "Joe, this is Martha Cain. We're building a cabin up on Whiskey Ridge." Joe looked at Martha with interest. "Whiskey Ridge? That's rough country for building. So people keep telling me," Martha said. Joe laughed. "Well, if Eli's helping you, you've got a shot. He's the best carpenter I've ever seen, though he's too stubborn to admit it." He walked around the logs they'd brought, examining each one. "Good timber. Straight grain, minimal knots. I can mill these for you, have them ready in 3 days. You'll want them planned, I assume?" "Yes," Martha said. "And we'll need to arrange transport back up the ridge." "I can do that. Got a flatbed that can make it most of the way. You'll have to haul the last mile yourselves, but that's manageable." They discussed prices, delivery dates, and specifications. Martha pulled out her carefully hoarded money and counted out the deposit, watching the bills diminish with each one she handed over. It was frightening how quickly the money went, but Joe's prices were fair, and there was no other option. As they walked back toward Eli's horse, Martha calculated numbers in her head. If materials kept costing this much, if there were any complications, any delays, the money wouldn't last. It just wouldn't. "You're worrying," Eli observed. "I'm being realistic. There's a difference between realistic and catastrophic. We'll make it work. 1 log at a time, 1 board at a time. That's how everything gets built." Martha wanted to believe him. Standing there in the sawmill yard, with the smell of fresh pine surrounding them and the sound of saws in the background, she almost did. The rains came in the 3rd week. turning the clearing into a soup of mud and making every task twice as difficult. Water dripped through their tarp shelter, soaking their bedrolls despite their best efforts to stay dry. The fire sputtered and smoked, refusing to give proper heat. Martha's joints ached worse in the damp, and she could see Eli limping more, though he never complained. They'd managed to lay the first course of the cabin's foundation by then. Heavy logs notched and fitted together atop the old stone base. It was slow, painstaking work. Each log had to be perfect, level, square, tight-fitting. One mistake now would multiply through every course above it. Eli checked and rechecked every measurement, his patience inexhaustible. My father used to say that a foundation is like a promise, he told Martha as they worked one grey, drizzling morning. You're making a promise to everything that comes after. Better make it an honest one, Martha understood. She'd watched David build enough structures on the farm to know that cutting corners early meant disaster later. But understanding didn't make the work less tedious, less exhausting. On the fourth day of rain, Martha woke to find Eli already up, standing at the edge of the clearing, looking down toward the valley. His posture was tense, and when she joined him, she saw why. The creek that ran along their property line had swollen to 3 times its normal size, a churning brown torrent that had jumped its banks in places. We need to check the timber we've got stacked, Eli said. If that water comes up much more, we could lose everything. They spent the morning moving logs to higher ground, hauling them one by one up the slope behind the cabin site. It was brutal work in the rain, their boots slipping in the mud, their hands numb with cold. By afternoon, Martha's back was screaming and her clothes were soaked through, but the lumber was safe. That evening, as they huddled under the tarp trying to coax warmth from a reluctant fire, Eli pulled off his leather work gloves and examined them. They were old, the leather worn smooth and soft in places, cracked in others. Martha had noticed him favoring them throughout the work, how he'd adjusted them carefully each morning. These were my father's, Eli said, turning them over in his hands. He gave them to me when I got my first ranch job. I was 17. He said, a man's hands are his fortune, protect them. I've had these 40 years, patched them more times than I can count. He held them out to Martha. Your hands are getting torn up. These will fit you better than those thin ones you're using. Take them. Martha hesitated. Eli, I can't. Those belong to your father, and now I'm giving them to you. My father would approve. He always said tools should be used, not kept like relics. You need them more than I do. I've got another pair in my pack. Martha took the gloves carefully, feeling the weight of them, the history embedded in every crack and stain. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll take care of them. I know you will. She put them on, and they fit better than her own had, snug but flexible, already broken in. When she flexed her fingers, she could almost feel the echo of all the work these gloves had done over the years. All the fences built, all the horses gentled, all the honest labor. The next morning the rain had stopped, and they woke to a world washed clean and bright. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, and sunlight broke through the clouds in golden shafts. Martha felt her spirits lift for the first time in days. They were setting the second course of logs when Martha heard an engine in the distance. Both of them straightened, listening. A truck was coming up the old logging road, grinding its way over the rough terrain, expecting someone. Eli asked. No. They watched as a battered pickup emerged from the tree line and pulled into the clearing. A woman got out, maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and work clothes that had seen better days. She studied the sight for a moment, then walked toward them. You Martha Cain? She called out. I am. I'm Sarah Brennan, Joe's daughter. He sent me up to check on you, make sure the rain didn't cause any problems. She glanced at the cabin foundation, then at their tarp shelter. Looks like you've been managing. We have, Martha said. Though it's been rough. Sarah nodded. Dad said you were building up here. Wanted me to tell you, if you need any help, he's got some lumber he can sell cheap. Irregular cuts, nothing wrong with them, just odd sizes that don't sell easy. Thought you might be able to use them for interior work, shelving, that kind of thing. How cheap? Martha asked, her mind already calculating. Half price. Maybe less if you can haul it yourselves. It was a generous offer, and Martha felt a swell of gratitude. Tell your father thank you. We'll come down next week when we're ready for it. Sarah started to leave, then paused. Listen, I don't mean to pry, but you planning to spend the winter up here? That's the plan. It gets rough. Snow can be 6 feet deep by January, and that road becomes impassable. You'll be cut off for weeks at a time. I know, Martha said. We're preparing for it. Sarah looked skeptical but didn't argue. Well, if you need anything before the snow comes, let us know. Dad likes Eli, and he seems to think you're all right too. That counts for something. After she left, Eli turned to Martha. She's right, you know. About winter. We need to be thinking about supplies, food, fuel, medical kit. Things can go wrong fast out here when you're isolated. I've been thinking about it, Martha admitted, making lists in my head. But every dollar I spend on supplies is a dollar I don't have for building materials. You can't live in a finished cabin if you freeze to death before it's done. Eli pointed out. They spent that evening revising their plans and budget. Martha pulled out her notebook, and they went through everything. Food stores, firewood, kerosene for lamps, candles, matches, ammunition for hunting, basic medicines. The list grew longer, and the numbers more frightening. We need to hunt more, Eli said. Get some meat put by. And I can trap, learned from my grandfather. Rabbit, squirrel, maybe a deer if we're lucky. We'll need to smoke or salt it for storage. I can forage, Martha added. I know plants well enough. Wild onions, mushrooms, berries. There's cattails growing by the creek. The roots are edible. They were planning survival, Martha realized. Not just building a cabin, but preparing to live through a winter that could kill them if they weren't careful. It was sobering. She thought of her daughter in Portland, warm and safe. Rebecca had called the rental room in Fossil before Martha left, one last attempt to convince her mother to come stay with them. Mom, please, Rebecca had said. This is crazy. You're 62 years old. You can't just walk into the mountains and build a cabin by yourself. I'm not by myself, Martha had wanted to say, but that wasn't true then. She was alone, and the plan was crazy, and part of her knew it. But now, sitting across the fire from Eli, with the foundation of her cabin rising behind them, she didn't feel crazy. She felt determined, alive in a way she hadn't been since David died. We'll make it, she said, more to herself than to Eli. One way or another. We'll make it through. Eli looked at her in the firelight, and something in his expression softened. Yes, he said, I believe we will. By mid-October, the cabin walls had risen to shoulder height, and Martha could finally see the shape of what they were building. It was real now, solid, not just a dream sketched on paper, but actual timber and sweat and determination made physical. Each morning when she woke, the first thing she did was look at those walls, reminding herself that this was happening, that she was actually doing this impossible thing. But the work had taken its toll. Martha's hands, even protected by Eli's father's gloves, were covered in cuts and calluses. She'd lost more weight, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had always been sturdy, but was now bordering on gaunt. Eli looked thinner too, the lines in his face deeper. Though his eyes remained sharp and focused, they'd developed a rhythm together, an unspoken understanding of each other's strengths and limitations. Eli handled the precise work, the measuring, the notching, the fitting of joints. Martha did the heavy lifting, the hauling, the endless tasks of gathering and preparing. They worked well together, rarely needing words to communicate. A gesture, a glance, was often enough. One afternoon, while Eli was up on a ladder setting a window frame, Martha sat on the foundation to rest. She pulled out the old compass she'd carried with her from the farm, David's compass, the one he'd used for years when setting fence lines. It was brass and dented, the glass face scratched but still readable. She turned it in her hands, watching the needle swing and settle, always finding north. That's a fine piece, Eli said from above. He'd paused in his work and was watching her. It was my husband's. His father gave it to him, and his father before that. 3 generations of Cains used this compass to keep their fences straight and their fields square. You think about him much? Every day. Sometimes I'll be in the middle of doing something, and I'll think, David would know how to do this better. David would have a joke about this. It's like he's still here, just out of sight. She closed her fingers around the compass. Other times I can barely remember his face. Isn't that terrible? 40 years together, and sometimes I can't quite picture him. Eli climbed down from the ladder and sat beside her. It's not terrible. It's human. When Ellie died, I was terrified I'd forget her. So I tried to hold on to everything, her voice, her smell, the way she hummed while she cooked. But you can't hold on that tight. Memory isn't meant to be gripped like that. It's meant to flow through you, like water through your hands. Did you forget? Some things. But the important things, how she made me feel, the kind of person she was, those stayed. The details got softer, but the truth of her remained. Martha nodded, understanding. I'm afraid sometimes that if I move forward, if I build this new life, I'm betraying him somehow. Like I'm saying what we had didn't matter. Is that what you think? No, but it feels that way sometimes. Eli was quiet for a moment, then he said, After Brian died, I couldn't stay in our house. Every room had him in it. His baby pictures on the wall, his high school football trophy, the chair he used to sit in when he came home on leave. Ellie wanted to keep it all, said it was a way of honoring him. But I felt like I was living in a shrine, and shrines are for the dead. I needed to be around life. Is that why you left? Part of it. The other part was, I couldn't give Ellie what she needed. She wanted to talk about Brian, remember him together. I couldn't do it. The grief was too big, too raw. So I ran. He picked up a wood chip and turned it over in his fingers. Took me years to realize I wasn't dishonoring Brian by living. I was dishonoring him by not living, by wasting the time he didn't get to have. Do you regret leaving your wife? Every day. But I also know I couldn't have stayed. Not then. Maybe if I'd been stronger, wiser. But I was just a broken man who didn't know how to fix himself. He stood and offered Martha his hand. Come on. Daylight's burning, and we've got another window to set. They worked through the afternoon, and Martha found herself thinking about what Eli had said, about memory and grief and moving forward, about the difference between honoring the past and being imprisoned by it. That evening, as they prepared dinner over the fire, Martha heard a sound that made her stop, the distinctive crack of a branch breaking under weight. Somewhere in the trees beyond the clearing, both she and Eli froze, listening. Mabel, who'd been grazing nearby, raised her head and brayed nervously. Bear, Martha whispered. Eli shook his head slightly. Too deliberate. Bear would make more noise. He stood slowly, reaching for the rifle he kept near the camp. Stay here. But Martha picked up the axe they'd been using for kindling and followed him to the edge of the clearing. They stood in the failing light, watching the tree line. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was younger than them, maybe 40, wearing stained work clothes and carrying a backpack. His face was weathered and hard, his eyes darting between Martha and Eli and the cabin behind them. Didn't know anyone was up here, he said. His voice was rough, unfriendly. It's private property, Eli said, not raising the rifle but not lowering it either. Can we help you with something? Just passing through. Saw the smoke from your fire. The man's eyes lingered on their camp, taking inventory. Nice setup you got here. Building a cabin? We are, Martha said, keeping her voice steady despite the unease crawling up her spine. Long way from town for an old woman to be building. You up here alone? She's not alone, Eli said, his tone hardening. And like she said, this is private property. You're welcome to fill your water bottles from the creek and be on your way. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Sure. Don't mean any trouble. He made a show of filling his bottles from the creek, taking his time, his eyes constantly scanning their camp. Finally, he shouldered his pack. Might see you around. He disappeared back into the trees, but the unease he'd brought didn't leave with him. Martha and Eli stood watching the forest for a long time after he was gone. He'll be back, Eli said quietly. You think so? I know so. Men like that. He's sizing things up, seeing what's worth taking. And up here, miles from anyone, he knows there's no law to stop him. Martha felt cold despite the fire. What do? We stay alert. Keep the rifle loaded. Don't leave the camp unattended. Eli looked at the half-built cabin. And we work faster. The sooner we get that cabin finished and secured, the safer we'll be. That night, Martha lay in her bedroll, unable to sleep, listening to every sound in the forest. The cabin that had felt like a promise that morning now felt like a target. And winter was coming. The stranger didn't return that night or the next, but his presence hung over the camp like a shadow. Martha found herself jumping at sounds, her hand reaching for the axe or a heavy branch whenever she heard movement in the forest. Eli insisted they take turns keeping watch through the night, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Neither of them slept well. They worked longer hours now, pushing through exhaustion, racing against both winter and the unnamed threat. The cabin walls rose higher, 4 feet, then 5, then 6. Eli began work on the door, selecting the best boards, planning them smooth, fitting them together with the kind of care usually reserved for fine furniture. A door is important, he told Martha as he worked. It's the line between inside and outside, between safe and dangerous. It needs to be solid, needs to close right, lock right. A weak door is an invitation, Martha understood. She'd grown up in ranch country where everyone knew the stories. Isolated homesteads robbed, travelers who went missing in the mountains, the casual violence that could erupt far from civilization. She'd never thought she'd have to worry about such things at her age, but here she was, an old woman building a cabin in the wilderness with only another old man and a donkey for protection. One afternoon, while Martha was gathering firewood near the creek, she found fresh boot prints in the mud, not hers, not Eli's. Her heart hammered as she followed them with her eyes. They circled the clearing at a distance, staying just inside the tree line, as if someone had been watching the camp. She hurried back and showed Eli, his face darkened. He's been back. Probably more than once, watching us work. He studied the prints. Size 10, maybe 11. Recent. These were made this morning while we were working on the north wall. Should we go to town? Report it? Report what? A man walking in the forest? We don't even know his name. Eli shook his head. No, we handle this ourselves. Tonight, we set up a perimeter. String some tin cans on fishing line around the camp. If anyone comes close, we'll hear it. They spent the evening preparing, working by lamplight to string their makeshift alarm system. It was primitive but effective. Martha felt slightly better having it in place, though she knew it wouldn't stop a determined person, just give them warning. That night, around 2 in the morning, the cans rattled. Martha was on watch, sitting by the banked fire with Eli's rifle across her lap. The sound froze her for a split second, then she was moving, shaking Eli awake. He came alert instantly, grabbing his boots and the heavy flashlight. They stood back to back in the center of the camp, listening. The cans had gone silent, but Martha could feel someone out there in the darkness watching. I know you're there, Eli called out, his voice carrying across the clearing. This is your only warning. You come into this camp uninvited, you'll regret it. Silence. Then from the darkness, the stranger's voice. Just wanted to see how your cabin's coming along. Looks good. Shame if something happened to it. Nothing's going to happen to it. Eli said, things happen all the time in the mountains. Fires, accidents. People get hurt when they're far from help. There was a pause. Nice old donkey you got. Be a shame if she wandered off or something. Martha felt rage flash through her fear. Threatening them was one thing, but threatening Mabel, you touch that animal, Eli said, his voice deadly calm, and I will hunt you down. That's not a threat, friend. That's a promise. Laughter drifted from the trees. Big talk for an old man. But the voice was moving away now, retreating into the forest. They stood watch together until dawn, neither willing to sleep. When grey light finally crept across the clearing, they checked the perimeter. More boot prints, circling closer this time. A cigarette butt left deliberately on the stone foundation. A message. I was here. He's trying to scare us off, Martha said, her hands shaking with exhaustion and anger. Make us abandon the cabin? I know why. What does he want? Eli examined the cabin with new eyes. Could be he wants the land. Could be he's just mean and doesn't like seeing other people succeed where he's failed. Could be he's been using this ridge for something, hiding stolen goods, cooking meth, and we're in the way. He turned to her. The question is, do we stay or go? Martha looked at the cabin. They were so close. The walls were nearly complete. The roof frame was ready to go up. Another 3 weeks, maybe 4, and it would be finished. Weatherproof, a real home. "I'm not leaving," she said. "He doesn't get to take this from me. I've lost too much already." Then we make a plan. We can't keep this up. No sleep, constant fear. We need to either settle this or find a way to make ourselves less vulnerable. They spent the day fortifying the camp. They moved their sleeping area inside the cabin walls, where there was more protection. They set up a proper door frame and hung the door Eli had been working on, even though the cabin had no roof yet. They positioned the rifle and axe where they could be reached quickly. And they made noise, hammering, sawing, talking loudly, making it clear they weren't intimidated. That evening, Eli did something Martha didn't expect. He sat down and wrote a letter. "Who are you writing to?" she asked. "Joe Brennan. I'm telling him where we are, what's happening, and that if anything happens to us, there's a man up here who needs looking into. I'm describing him as best I can." He folded the letter and put it in an envelope. "Tomorrow, I'm riding down to Kimberly and mailing this. It's insurance. If our friend knows people are aware of his presence, he'll think twice about escalating. But that means leaving me alone here for most of the day. I know. But it needs to be done. You'll have the rifle, and Mabel will stay with you. She'll alert if anyone comes close. I'll leave before dawn and be back by dark." Martha didn't like it, but she understood the reasoning. "Be careful. Always am." That night, lying in the darkness inside their half-built cabin, Martha listened to Eli's breathing on the other side of the space. It was strange, she thought, how quickly you could get used to someone's presence. A month ago, she'd been alone, determined to build this cabin by herself. Now she couldn't imagine doing it without Eli. More than that, she couldn't imagine him not being part of whatever came after. When had that happened? When had he become more than just help? More than just a fellow traveler? She couldn't pinpoint the moment, but it was there, real as the boards beneath her. "Martha?" Eli's voice came through the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for not giving up. For letting me be part of this. I should be thanking you. I'd never have gotten this far alone. Maybe, but you gave me something I didn't know I needed, a reason to stay in one place, a reason to care again." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. "Eli, get some sleep." Morning comes early. She lay awake for a long time after, listening to the night sounds, feeling the solid walls around them, thinking about reasons to care and second chances, and whether it was possible, at 62 and 73, to start completely over. The answer, she decided, was yes. They were doing it right now. Eli left before dawn as planned, taking his horse down the mountain toward Kimberly. Martha stood at the edge of the clearing, watching him go, the rifle in her hands, feeling more alone than she had in weeks. Mabel nuzzled her shoulder, and Martha scratched the donkey's ears absently. "Just you and me today, girl," she said. "Let's keep our eyes open." She spent the morning working on the cabin's interior, measuring and marking where the loft would go, where she'd build shelving, where the stove would sit. It helped to focus on the details, to imagine the finished space. She could almost see it, curtains at the windows, a quilt on the bed, books on the shelf. A home. Around midday, Mabel began to bray urgently. Martha grabbed the rifle and hurried outside. A figure was approaching through the trees, but it wasn't the stranger. It was a woman, elderly, Native American, leaning heavily on a walking stick. She moved slowly, with the careful steps of someone navigating pain. Martha kept the rifle ready, but didn't aim it. "Can I help you?" The woman stopped at the edge of the clearing, breathing hard from the climb. She was perhaps 70. With long grey hair braided down her back and a weathered face that spoke of a lifetime outdoors. Her dark eyes took in the cabin, the camp, and Martha with sharp intelligence. "You're the one building here," she said. "It wasn't a question. I am. This is my land, is it?" The woman's tone was gentle, not confrontational. "May I sit?" "My legs aren't what they used to be." Martha hesitated, then nodded toward a log near the cabin. The woman made her way over and sat with a sigh of relief. Martha remained standing, rifle lowered, but still in her hands. "I'm Martha Cain. This land was left to me by my mother." "I know." I knew your great-grandfather, Henry Cain. I was just a girl then, but I remember him. Good man, fair. The woman looked around the clearing. This was my people's land before it was his. We camped here every summer for more generations than anyone counted. Called it Naxstite, place where the water speaks. Martha felt something shift in her chest. I didn't know that. Most people don't. When the government divided the land, gave parcels to settlers, my people were pushed to the reservation. Your great-grandfather knew this. He felt bad about it. When he died, he left a letter with the land office. Said if any of the original families ever needed this place, they had first right to buy it back. But the letter got lost. These things happen. I'm sorry, Martha said, and meant it. But the deed is legal. I'm not disputing that. I'm just telling you the history. The woman studied Martha's face. You look tired and frightened. There's been a man threatening us. Watching the camp. The woman's expression darkened. Ray Collins. He's been squatting in these mountains for years, running from something. Bad man. My grandson saw him in town last week, heard him talking about some fool old woman building a cabin alone on Whiskey Ridge. Said he'd have the place for himself by winter. How do you know all this? Because Ray Collins is my nephew, my sister's boy. She died of shame over what he became, thief, drunk, violent. I've tried to help him, but some people don't want to be saved. They just want to drag others down with them. Martha sat down on the foundation, the rifle across her lap. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're facing. Ray won't stop. He sees this cabin, this land, and he thinks it should be his. He's got no legal claim, but that won't matter to him. He'll wait until you're vulnerable, and he'll take what he wants. We're not leaving. I didn't think you would. You've got that same stubborn look your great-grandfather had. The woman smiled slightly. My name is Sarah Whitehawk. I live about 8 miles from here on the reservation. I came to give you this. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to Martha. It was old, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still readable. Martha unfolded it carefully. It was a letter written in careful script. To whom it may concern, this land at Whiskey Ridge was given to me by the United States government in 1889, but I know in my heart it was taken from people who had more right to it than I. The Whitehawk family camped here for generations before I came. If any of that family ever wishes to return, or if circumstances arise where they have need of this place, I want it known that I believe they should have first claim. This land is in my name, but it holds their memory. Henry Cain, 1923. Martha read it twice, her hands shaking. Where did you get this? Found it in the county records 2 years ago when I was researching land claims. The clerk didn't know what to make of it, so he filed it away. I made a copy. What do you want me to do with it? Sarah Whitehawk looked at her steadily. I want you to know the full story of this place. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. My people have a saying, land doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. Your great-grandfather understood that. He was a caretaker, not an owner. I think maybe you understand it too. Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes. She thought of all the reasons she'd come here. Desperation, grief, the need for a place that was hers alone. But was anywhere ever really ours alone? Didn't every place carry the weight of everyone who'd been there before? I can't give up this land, she said quietly. I have nowhere else to go. I know. And I'm not asking you to. Sarah stood, leaning on her walking stick. I'm asking you to be a good caretaker, to respect what this place was and is. And I'm telling you about Ray because you need to understand. He's family, but he's dangerous. You should go to the sheriff. We're miles from town, and by the time the sheriff got here, I know. So I'll tell you something else. My grandson Thomas served in Afghanistan. Army Ranger. He's home now, living with me. He checks on me every few days. I'll ask him to start checking on you too. Ray won't try anything if he knows Thomas is watching. You do that? Even though... Martha gestured at the cabin, the land. Even though. Because the wrong person using this land will dishonor it. You're building something honest here. I can see that. My great-grandmother would rather see that than have the land sit empty. Or worse, have Ray take it. Martha stood and extended her hand. Sarah took it, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," Martha said. "Thank your great-grandfather. He started this, whether he knew it or not." Sarah looked at the cabin. "You're doing good work. Finish it, live well here. That's all anyone can ask." She turned and began the slow walk back into the forest. Martha watched her go, the letter still in her hand. When Eli returned that evening, Martha told him everything. He read the letter twice, then set it down carefully. "Changes things, doesn't it?" He said. "Does it? I don't know." "Does it for you?" Martha thought about her great-grandfather, a man she'd never known, writing that letter 60 years ago. Thought about the White Hawk family, displaced but not forgotten. Thought about what it meant to belong to a place versus own a place. "I think," she said slowly, "it means we build this cabin right. We take care of this land. And when we're gone, maybe we leave our own letter, letting whoever comes next know the full story." Eli nodded. "I can live with that." "There's more," Martha said, and told him about Ray Collins, about Thomas, about the network of protection Sarah Whitehawk was offering. "So we're not as alone as we thought," Eli said. "No, we're not." That night, as they sat by the fire, Martha pulled out her mother's Bible and carefully tucked Henry Cain's letter inside it. Someday, she thought, someone would find this and know the truth. For now, it was enough to know it herself, to understand that the land she'd thought was simply hers carried stories deeper than any deed could convey. The cabin was no longer just shelter. It was a continuation of something that had started long before she was born. And that, somehow, made it mean even more. Thomas Whitehawk appeared the next morning, riding a sturdy paint horse and carrying a rifle across his saddle. He was in his early 30s, lean and alert, with his grandmother's dark eyes and a quiet competence that reminded Martha of soldiers she'd known over the years, men who'd seen things that changed them. "My grandmother sent me," he said after introducing himself. "Said you might need an extra set of eyes." Eli shook his hand. "Appreciate it. We've had some trouble." "I know. Ray Collins." Thomas's jaw tightened. "He's been a problem for years. Sheriff can't seem to keep him locked up for long. He's clever enough not to get caught at anything serious. But everyone knows what he is. Your grandmother said you'd help watch the place. I'll do better than that. I'll make sure he knows I'm watching." Ray's a coward at heart. He preys on people he thinks are vulnerable. Once he knows you've got backup, he'll move on. Thomas looked at the cabin. "This is good work. You planning to finish before the snow comes?" "That's the goal," Martha said. "We've got maybe 3 weeks if the weather holds. Then let's make sure nothing interferes with that." Thomas rode the perimeter of the clearing, studying the approaches, the sightlines. When he returned, he pointed to several spots. "Set up a watch post there on that high ground. You can see anyone coming from a mile away. And I'll leave you this." He handed Martha a small two-way radio. "It's got a range of about 10 miles. You see Ray or anyone else causing trouble, you call me. I'll come running." Martha took the radio, feeling its weight. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know us. My grandmother asked me to." "That's enough. But also," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "when I came back from Afghanistan, I didn't know what to do with myself. Everything felt pointless. My grandmother told me that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about finding something worth protecting. You're building something honest here. That's worth protecting." After Thomas left, Martha and Eli worked with renewed energy. They had 3 weeks to finish, 3 weeks to make the cabin secure before winter arrived in earnest. The walls were complete now, solid and straight. Today, they would begin the roof. Roofing was dangerous work, especially for 2 people their age. One slip, one moment of carelessness, and someone could fall. They moved carefully, methodically. Eli climbed the ladder first, testing each rung. Martha handed up boards, then followed with nails and a hammer. The view from the roof took her breath away. She could see down into the valley, across to distant ridges, up to peaks already dusted with early snow. The world spread out vast and beautiful, and for a moment the fear and exhaustion fell away. This was why she'd come here, for this view, this freedom, this sense of standing at the edge of something larger than herself. Beautiful, isn't it? Eli said, following her gaze. Yes, they worked side by side, nailing down the roof boards with careful precision. Each board had to overlap the one below it. Each nail had to be placed just right. It was painstaking work, but there was a rhythm to it, a satisfaction in seeing the roof take shape beneath their hands. "Martha," Eli said during a water break, "I've been thinking." "About after? After what?" "After the cabin's finished. About what comes next." Martha set down her cup. She'd been avoiding this conversation, this question. Once the cabin was done, what happened to them? Did Eli move on, continue his wandering? Did she live here alone, the way she'd originally planned? "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't let myself think past getting it built. Well, I have. And I'd like to stay. If you'll have me." He looked at her directly, his pale eyes steady. I'm not trying to presume anything. I'm saying I'd like to build a small place of my own, just over that rise there. Close enough to help if you need it, far enough to give you privacy. We could share resources, watch out for each other. Be neighbors." Martha felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Neighbors, or more if you wanted. But I'm not pushing. I don't want to leave. This feels like home in a way nowhere has since Ellie died. And that's partly the land, but it's mostly you." Martha didn't trust herself to speak right away. She looked out at the valley, at the pines swaying in the wind, at the sky that was already starting to darken with the promise of evening. "I'd like that," she said finally. "You staying, us being neighbors, and maybe seeing what more might look like." Eli smiled, really smiled, and Martha realized she hadn't seen him smile like that before. It transformed his weathered face, made him look younger, lighter. "Then let's finish this roof," he said. They worked through the afternoon, racing the fading light. By the time darkness fell, half the roof was complete. They climbed down carefully, muscles aching but spirits high. They'd made good progress. Another 3 days, and the roof would be weatherproof. That night, as they prepared dinner, Martha's daughter called on the cell phone Martha kept for emergencies. Rebecca's voice was tight with worry. "Mom, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm here, honey. On Whiskey Ridge, building the cabin. You're still doing that?" "Mom, it's almost November. You need to come home before winter sets in, please." "This is home now, Rebecca. And I'm not alone. I've got help, a friend." "We're almost finished." "A friend?" Rebecca's voice sharpened. "What friend?" "Mom, you don't know anyone up there." Martha glanced at Eli, who was politely not listening, focused on the fire. "His name is Eli Boone. He's been helping me build. He's a good man." There was a long pause. "Mom, is there something you're not telling me?" "I'm telling you I'm not alone anymore. I'm telling you I'm building a life that means something. And I'm asking you to trust that I know what I'm doing." Another pause. Then Rebecca's voice came softer. "Are you happy?" Martha considered the question. Was she happy? She was exhausted, sore, worried about money and winter, and whether they'd finish in time. But underneath all that, yes, there was something that felt like happiness, or at least the possibility of it. "I'm getting there," she said. "Then I guess that's all I can ask for. But Mom, be careful, okay? And call me more often. I worry. I will. I love you, honey. Love you too." After she hung up, Eli said, "She doesn't approve. She worries. It's what daughters do." Martha stirred the pot over the fire. "But she wants me to be happy. That's what parents want for their children, and children for their parents, I suppose. Happiness. Are you happy?" "I think I'm learning how to be again." "That's a start." Over the next few days, they finished the roof, installed the windows, hung the door with proper hinges and a lock. The cabin was taking shape, no longer just a shell but an actual dwelling. They brought the wood stove inside and positioned it carefully, then ran the stovepipe up through the roof. Martha stood inside the cabin and looked around, hardly believing what they'd accomplished. 4 walls, a roof, windows with real glass, a door that locked, a stove that would keep her warm. It wasn't finished. She still needed to build the loft, install shelving, chink the gaps between logs, but it was livable. She could survive a winter here. "We did it," she said to Eli. "We actually did it. We're not done yet. Still got work to do. But yes, we did it." That evening Thomas appeared again, riding into camp just as they were finishing dinner. His expression was serious. "Ray knows you're almost finished," he said without preamble. "Word got around town that you've been buying supplies, that the cabin's nearly done. He was in the bar in Kimberly yesterday, drunk and angry. Said some things about how nobody takes what's his. But the land isn't his," Martha protested. "Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what he believes. And he believes you took something from him." Thomas dismounted and tied his horse. "I think he's going to make a move soon, before you get properly settled. I'd like to camp here tonight, if you don't mind. Extra protection." Martha looked at Eli, who nodded. "We appreciate it," she said. They sat by the fire, the three of them, watching the darkness gather around the clearing. The cabin stood behind them, solid and real, but suddenly vulnerable too. They'd built something, but now they had to defend it. "Tomorrow," Eli said, "we finish what we can. Get the cabin as secure as possible. Make sure we've got supplies laid in, weapons ready. If he's coming, we'll be prepared." "When he comes," Thomas corrected. "Not if, when. Ray doesn't make threats he doesn't follow through on." Martha felt the weight of that settling over her. After everything they'd done, after all the work and sweat and hope, it might come down to defending this place against a man who wanted to take it. Part of her wanted to ask why. Why did it have to be this hard? Why couldn't she just build her cabin in peace? But she knew the answer. Nothing worth having came easy, and this cabin, this new life, it was worth fighting for. "Then we'll be ready," she said. The fire crackled between them, and overhead the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out below. But to Martha, sitting there with Eli and Thomas, preparing to defend the home she'd built with her own 2 hands, those dramas felt like everything. Tomorrow, she thought. Whatever comes, we'll face it tomorrow. But first, they had tonight. And tonight, they were safe. Ray Collins came at dawn, when the light was still grey and uncertain, when people were most vulnerable. Martha heard Mabel first, a frantic braying that brought her bolt upright from sleep. Eli was already moving, grabbing the rifle. Thomas emerged from his bedroll with the fluid speed of a trained soldier. They heard the sound of breaking glass, one of the cabin windows. Then laughter, harsh and ugly. "Come on out, old woman!" Ray's voice slurred with drink. "Time to have a conversation about this land." Martha's heart hammered, but her hands were steady as she pulled on her boots. This was it. This was what they'd been preparing for. "Stay inside," Thomas ordered, checking his rifle. "Let me handle this." "It's my cabin," Martha said. "I'm not hiding." Eli put a hand on her arm. "Then we go together, all 3 of us. But smart. We don't give him any openings." They moved to the door. Through the window, the one Ray hadn't broken, Martha could see him standing in the clearing. He wasn't alone. 2 other men were with him, both younger, both carrying the kind of nervous energy that came from bad decisions and worse company. Thomas stepped out first, rifle ready but not raised. "Ray, you need to leave now." "Tommy!" Ray's grin was wolfish. "Come to protect the old lady, have you? That's sweet. Real sweet. But this is family business. You're not family. Not anymore. Grandmother disowned you years ago. That's cold, Tommy, real cold. But it doesn't change facts. This land, it should be ours. Should have been ours all along. Instead, it went to white settlers who didn't deserve it. My great-grandfather was a good man," Martha said, stepping out behind Thomas. Eli moved to her left, creating a triangle. "He respected your people. Left a letter saying, 'I don't care about any letter. I care that I've been living rough in these mountains while land that should have been mine sits empty.' Well, not anymore. You're going to sign that deed over to me, old woman, or things are going to get unpleasant." "I'm not signing anything," Martha said, her voice steady, despite the fear coursing through her. "This is my land. I built that cabin with my own hands. You have no claim to it." Ray's expression hardened. "Last chance. Sign it over or we take it. You'll have to kill me first." The words surprised Martha even as she said them, but she meant them. She'd lost her husband, her farm, everything she'd built over a lifetime. She would not lose this, too. Ray pulled a gun from his waistband, a revolver, old but well-maintained. His companions tensed, one of them drawing a knife. "Ray," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm Martha had heard before in men who'd been to war. "Put the gun down. This ends now, one way or another. You choose how. I choose to get what's mine. Everything happened fast after that. Ray raised the gun, aiming at Martha. Thomas moved, his rifle coming up, but Eli was faster. He shoved Martha aside and threw the wagon wheel they'd repaired weeks ago. It spun through the air, awkward but effective, catching Ray's gun hand. The revolver fired, the bullet going wild, and the wheel crashed into Ray's chest, sending him stumbling backward. Thomas's rifle cracked once, not aimed at Ray, but at the ground near the feet of the man with the knife. The man jumped back, startled. The third man was already running, crashing into the forest. Ray recovered, scrambling for his gun, but Eli was on him, moving with surprising speed for a man of 73. They grappled, and Martha saw Eli's face set with grim determination. He wasn't trying to hurt Ray, just control him, keep him from the weapon. Thomas moved in, using his rifle butt to knock the gun clear, then pressed the barrel against Ray's back. "Stay down. Don't move." The man with the knife hesitated, looking at his options. Martha picked up the axe from near the cabin door and held it ready. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She felt cold, focused, clear. "Drop it," she said. "Drop the knife and get out of here, or I promise you'll regret staying." The man looked at her, really looked at her, and whatever he saw made him drop the knife and back away, hands raised. "I didn't sign up for this. I'm gone." He disappeared into the trees. Thomas had Ray face down in the dirt, hands behind his back. Eli stood over them both, breathing hard but unharmed. The morning sun was rising now, painting the clearing in gold, illuminating the broken window, the gun lying in the dirt. The cabin standing solid and unmoved behind them. "It's over," Thomas said, looking at Martha. "You okay?" Martha realized she was still holding the axe, her knuckles white. She lowered it slowly. "I'm okay." "Martha," Eli started. "I'm okay," she repeated, and this time she smiled, shaky but real. "We're okay," Ray groaned, trying to push himself up, but Thomas pressed him back down. "Stay put. Sheriff's going to want to talk to you about threatening people at gunpoint. Maybe this time they'll keep you locked up." Thomas kept Ray pinned while Eli fetched rope from the cabin. Together they bound Ray's hands securely. The fight had gone out of him now. He lay there defeated, mumbling curses and excuses in equal measure. "I'll radio for the sheriff," Thomas said, pulling out his own radio. "But it'll be hours before anyone can get up here. You two should stay inside the cabin until—" "No," Martha said. She walked over to where Ray lay and stood looking down at him. Up close, she could see he wasn't much older than 40, though hard living had aged him. His eyes, when they met hers, held a mix of anger and something that looked almost like desperation. "Why?" she asked. "Why come here? Why threaten people who've done nothing to you?" "You don't understand," Ray muttered. "Nobody understands. This was supposed to be ours, my grandmother's land, my mother's. They lost everything when they got pushed onto the reservation. Everything. And then I find out some old white lady is building a cabin on land that should have been mine. Should have been something I could give to my kids, if I had any. Something that mattered. So you thought you'd take it. Force me off with threats and violence? What else was I supposed to do? Ask nicely? When has asking nicely ever worked for people like me?" Martha felt a complicated mixture of anger and pity. She understood rage born of loss. She'd felt it herself after David died, after the bank took their farm. But she'd never let it turn her cruel, never used it as an excuse to hurt others. "Your grandmother came to see me," Martha said. "Sarah Whitehawk. She told me about your people's connection to this land. Showed me a letter my great-grandfather wrote acknowledging that. And you know what? It changed how I see this place. It's not just mine. It's everyone's who ever cared for it. I'm just the current keeper." Ray's expression shifted to confusion. "My grandmother came here?" "She did, and she offered to have Thomas watch over us. Not because we deserved it, but because she believes in honoring what's right. Even when it's hard, even when people have treated her people badly." Martha crouched down, so she was at eye level with Ray. "She's ashamed of you. Did you know that? Your own grandmother is ashamed because you chose violence over dignity." Ray's face crumpled, and for a moment Martha saw the lost boy underneath the angry man. "I don't know how to be anything else anymore," he said quietly. "I've messed up everything. Every job, every relationship, every chance. This was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be something I could finally get right. By stealing it? By threatening an old woman? That's not getting something right, Ray. That's just taking something wrong. Eli came over and put a hand on Martha's shoulder. Sheriff's on his way. Should be here by noon. Martha nodded but didn't move. She studied Ray, this broken man who'd almost destroyed everything she'd built. She should hate him. Part of her wanted to, but mostly she just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of fear. Tired of people hurting each other over pieces of ground that would outlast them all. "I'm not pressing charges," she said. Thomas's head snapped around. "What? Martha, he threatened you with a gun. He could have killed you. But he didn't, and sending him to prison, what does that solve? He'll just come out angrier, more broken." She looked at Ray. "I want him to go to his grandmother. I want him to apologize to her for the shame he's caused. And I want him to stay off this land, permanently. That's my price for not pressing charges." "Martha," Eli started. "It's my choice," she said firmly. "This is my land, my cabin, my decision." Ray was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "Why would you after I... Because somebody's got to break the cycle. Might as well be me. But Ray, if you ever come back here, if you ever threaten me or mine again, I will press charges. And I'll make sure you stay locked up as long as the law allows. Are we clear?" "Clear," Ray whispered. Thomas looked at his grandmother's letter, then at Ray, then back at Martha. Finally, he nodded. "I'll take him to her. Let her deal with him. But Martha, this is too generous. Maybe, or maybe it's the only way any of us heal." They untied Ray and helped him to his feet. He couldn't meet Martha's eyes, but as Thomas led him toward his horse, he paused. "I'm sorry," he said without turning around. "For what it's worth something," Martha said. "Make it worth more by changing." After they left, Martha and Eli stood in the clearing. The morning sun now fully risen, the cabin behind them with its one broken window, but otherwise intact. Martha's legs suddenly felt weak, and she sat down hard on a log. "You should have pressed charges," Eli said, sitting beside her. "Maybe, but I've spent too much of my life being angry. I'd rather spend what's left trying to understand." Eli put his arm around her shoulders, and Martha leaned into him, feeling the warmth of another human being. The comfort of not being alone. "Well," Eli said after a long moment, "we've got a window to fix." Martha laughed, surprising herself. Yes, we do." And somehow that felt like the most important thing in the world. Not the confrontation, not the danger, but the simple work of repairing what was broken and moving forward. Winter came to Whiskey Ridge 3 weeks later, arriving with a silence that Martha had learned to recognize. The hush before the first real snow. She stood at the window of her completed cabin, watching fat flakes drift down through the pines, and felt a contentment she hadn't known in years. The cabin was finished. Not perfect. There were gaps she'd have to recaulk come spring, and the shelving Eli had built was slightly crooked. But it was solid and warm, and hers. The wood stove radiated heat, keeping the single room comfortable even as the temperature outside dropped below freezing. On the wall hung a photograph Rebecca had sent. Martha and David on their wedding day, young and hopeful and impossibly naive about what life would bring. Next to it hung something new, a framed copy of Henry Cain's letter, the one acknowledging the Whitehawk family's connection to this land. Sarah had given it to Martha as a housewarming gift, along with a beautiful woven blanket that now lay across Martha's bed in the loft. "That's really coming down," Eli said, stepping through the door with an armload of firewood. Snow dusted his hat and shoulders, melting in the warmth of the cabin. His own place, a smaller cabin he'd built just over the rise, was finished too, but he spent most of his time here. Neither of them questioned it anymore. "First real snow of the season," Martha said. "I was beginning to think it would never come." "Careful what you wish for. By January, you'll be sick of it," Martha smiled. "Maybe, but right now, it's beautiful." They'd developed rhythms over the past few weeks, comfortable patterns of shared work and separate space. Mornings, Eli came over for coffee and they planned the day. Afternoons, they worked on their respective projects. Martha was building furniture. Eli was constructing a proper barn for the horse and Mabel. Evenings, they cooked together, sharing meals and stories and the quiet companionship of two people who'd found something unexpected in each other. It wasn't romance exactly, or not only romance. It was partnership, friendship, the recognition of souls that had been battered by life and found peace in each other's presence. Some nights, Eli stayed, sleeping in the loft beside Martha. Other nights, he went back to his own cabin. They didn't label it, didn't try to define what they were to each other. The not defining felt right, felt honest. "Rebecca called yesterday," Martha said, pouring them both coffee. "She and the family are coming to visit in the spring. She wants to see the cabin." "That's good. You've been wanting that." "I have. I think she's starting to understand why I needed to do this, why I couldn't just accept charity even from my own daughter." Martha wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "She said I sound different, happier. Are you happy?" Martha considered the question. 6 months ago, she'd been at the lowest point of her life. Widowed, homeless, grieving everything she'd lost. Now she stood in a cabin she'd built with her own hands, on land that was hers, with a man she'd learned to care for in ways she hadn't thought possible at her age. "Yes," she said simply, "I'm happy. Not in the way I was with David, that was a whole different life, but in a new way, a way that feels right for who I am now." Eli nodded, understanding in his pale eyes. "I know what you mean. This isn't the life I had with Ellie, but it's a good life. Maybe even the life I needed without knowing it." They stood together at the window, watching the snow accumulate on the ground, on the trees, on the roof of the cabin they'd built together. In the distance, through the falling snow, Martha could see smoke rising from Eli's cabin. Two homes, two lives intertwined but not consumed by each other. "Thomas stopped by yesterday," Eli said, "while you were in town." "Oh?" "Wanted to tell us Ray's doing better. He's been sober 2 months, working at the sawmill, living with Sarah, following her rules. She's tough on him, but that's what he needs." "I'm glad," Martha said, and meant it. "I hope he makes it. Sarah said to tell you thank you for giving him a chance instead of burying him." Martha shrugged. "We all need chances. God knows I've needed enough of them." That evening, as the snow continued to fall and the light faded to blue dusk, Martha lit the lamps in her cabin and sat at the table Eli had helped her build. She pulled out paper and a pen, the old-fashioned kind she preferred, and began writing a letter of her own. "To whom it may concern," she wrote, "when I came to Whiskey Ridge in September 2025, I was broken. I'd lost my husband, my farm, everything I thought defined me. I came here with nothing but a pack, a deed, and a desperate hope that I could build something new. What I found was more than land, more than shelter. I found that it's never too late to start over. That age is just a number, not a sentence. That two people who've lost everything can help each other find something worth building. This cabin was raised with sweat and stubbornness, with grief transformed into purpose, with the help of a good man and the blessing of the land's original caretakers. If you're reading this, I hope you'll care for this place the way it deserves, not as property to own, but as a gift to steward. And I hope you'll remember that no matter how old you are, no matter what you've lost, it's never too late to build something that lasts." Martha Cain, December 2025. She folded the letter carefully and placed it with Henry Cain's in her grandmother's Bible. Someday, someone would find them both and know the story of this place, this cabin, these lives. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering the world in clean white, and Martha Cain, 62 years old and finally home, felt at peace. The ridge was quiet, the cabin warm, and tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, new moments of simple grace. But tonight was perfect, just as it was.